All right, welcome to Chapter 4, Section 7, Solving Quadratics Using Completing the Square. And the first definition, of course, is completing the square. All right, so this is a process by which you solve or find the zeros of a quadratic where u All right, so this might not make a whole lot of sense, but it says process by which you solve or find zeros of a quadratic, where you make one side a square of a binomial. So what you're using is you're using this process. You're using the, well, and actually it's the x squared plus 2ax plus a squared. And this is x plus a squared. So what you're doing is you're basically using this to set it up in this format. And once you set it up in this format, you then, all you have to do, like if you had x plus 2 squared equals 36. If you can make an equation look like this, all you have to do is square root both sides. X plus 2 equals plus or minus 6. And then you subtract 2 from both sides. So your choices are 6 minus 2 or negative 6 minus 2. And so you end up with two different answers, 4 or negative 8. Those are the two solutions. All right, so words. To complete the square for the expression, x squared plus bx, you add half of b squared. So basically you add half of b, you square it, and it ends up being this right here. And since it's the square, it's basically x plus b over 2. So there's a few things you need to do first before you start completing the square. Well, let's see where we should start doing it. All right, so right here, find the value of c that makes x squared plus 12x plus c a perfect square trinomial. Then write the expression as the square of a binomial. So the first thing you have to do is find half the coefficient of x. So here's the coefficient of x. Find out what half of it is. Well, that's 6. Square the result of step 1 to get 36. Replace c with the result of step 2. When c equals 36. So what that means now is you have x squared plus 12x plus 36. This is a x plus 6 times x plus 6, which gives us a binomial squared. So let's do it a couple more times. The first thing we need to do is find half the coefficient of x. So half the coefficient of x is 24, or negative 24, divided by 2, which gives us negative 12. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2, you take negative 12 You square the result from step 1 to give us 144. And so that is now step 3, replace c with the result of step 2. So now you have x squared minus 24x plus 144. That is what c is. Now, the reason we make it a perfect square trinomial is we then make it a binomial squared. And you do that by just saying x, well, half of b squared is negative 12, so minus 12, and you're done. So here, the more you do, the easier it gets. So half of the b, that's 10 over 2, is 5. Then you square 5 and get 25, and that is what you add. That is what c is, 25. Now you can simply write it as a square of a binomial, because this just comes down there. All right, so let's take a look at guided practice number 1. You have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 36. Now, normally I would say make this equal to 0. But please notice, perfect square, perfect square. So x plus 3 squared. So if you can remember that, it's a lot less work. Square root both sides, plus or minus square root 36. Minus 3 from both sides. So you have 6 minus 3 or negative 6 minus 3. So your two choices are 3 or negative 9. Those are your two solutions. Those are your zeros. All right. Oh, we're not there yet. So let's try number 3. You have x squared minus 24x equals 100. All right. So perfect square, perfect square. That's x plus 12 squared equals 100. And now when you square root both sides, x plus 12 equals plus or minus 10. Minus 12 both sides. X equals 10 minus 12 or negative 10 minus 12. So your answers are negative 2 or negative 22. Those are your two choices. All right, let's take a look at number 5 from your guided practices. It tells us to find the c value and then rewrite it as the square of a binomial. So our final answer should be something like this. All right, and from before, you take this coefficient, divide by 2, equals 11. You square 11 and you get 121. So now I know that c value. It's x squared plus 22x plus 121. Once I know that, this is what's down there. So that's a confusing part. And there's the binomial. All right. So let me give you steps that you can follow. Alright, so all this just appeared in front of you. Go ahead and pause the video, write it down, and I'll explain each step. Alright, so hopefully you wrote this all down. If not, make sure you pause it, please. Write them all down, and I will explain them. So, what you're doing is you're first putting something in standard form. So if you have something like x squared, um, let's say 2x squared plus 4, or no, plus 8 equals negative 24x. So if you start with this, the first thing you have to do is put it in standard form. That means add 24x to both sides. And now you have 2x squared plus 24x plus 8 equals 0. Then you divide by a if not 1. So here a is 2. So I divide everything by 2 and I get x squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0. Now you may try to factor this, all right, but it might not work out. And so now you're going to use completing the square to factor this for you. So let's continue the steps. So this was step 1. This was step 2. Step 3 says move c to the other side. We move c to the other side by subtracting. And you end up with x squared plus 12x equals negative 4. That was step 3. Color code these a little bit for you. All right. So 1 was to put it in standard form. 2 was divide by a. 3 was to move c to the other side. Now we add half of b squared to both sides. So b is equal to 12. So half of b is 12 over 2, which is 6. So you are adding half of b squared to both sides. All right. And as long as you do one thing, the same thing to both sides, you're fine. All right, let's now simplify x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 32. That was step 3. Step 4. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was step 4. Step 5. Convert a perfect square trinomial to square of a binomial. So step 5 means that now, basically look at this green part. Now should be x plus b over 2 squared. So x plus b over 2 is 6 squared equals 32. So in just 4 quick steps, you ended up with a square of a binomial. And now it's just like 4.6, I think. Square both sides. Simplify 32. Here's a pair of 4s that you're looking for. This is what's left over, so the plus or minus 4 square root 2. And now we subtract 6. And proper math etiquette says to go ahead and put the minus 6, the real number, in front. Oh, not the real number, but the whole number in front. So these are your 2 solutions. All right, let's look at the steps that we just wrote down, and let's go over here. So, write original equation, done. Left side of the form x squared plus bx. That means x squared minus 10x equals negative 13. Complete the square, so we take x squared minus 10x and we add b over 2 squared to both sides. So for us, that's negative 5 over, or negative 10 over 2 squared, or 25. So I'm adding 25 to both sides. This is now a PST. This right here is a perfect square trinomial. We write it as a binomial squared, or the square of a binomial. And we write x, not plus 5, half of b, half of negative 10 is minus 5. Over here we have 13? No, 12. And now you go ahead and solve like 4.6. Take the square of both sides. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus square root 12. Solve for x. Well, we need to simplify some. 3 times 4 and 2 times 2. Here's your pair. So it ends up being, let's see, add 5. There are a lot of steps we just did here, but it's 5 plus or minus 2 square root 3. So your solutions are 5 plus 2 root 3 and 5 minus 2 root 3. All right, now a is not 1. So we divide each side by a. So we divide everything by 3. Now we have x squared minus 4x plus 9 equals 0. We add c, or we move c to the other side. We have negative 4. We take half of that and square it. It's 4. So it's x squared minus 4x plus 4. Negative 9 plus 4. Right here, that's negative 5. This is x plus 2 squared. Oh, I'm sorry, not plus 2. Minus 2 squared. Now I square root both sides. So you end up with x minus 2 is the plus or minus square root negative 5. So we're very close to being done. When you add 2 to both sides, you end up with this. But remember, from 4.6, a negative inside of an even radical, you have to take the negative out and make it an imaginary unit. So it should be 2 plus or minus I square root 5. Or 2, oh not plus or minus, I'm sorry. 2 plus I square root 5. Or 2 minus I square root 5. And that's how it goes. All right, guided practice. Number 7. All right, so have to have leading coefficient. The first number here has to be 1. It is. So we move c to the other side. We take half of 6 squared, so that's 9. X squared plus 6x plus 9. You add 9 to both sides. This is now the square of a binomial. This is 5. And now it's at the point. So after just a couple steps, you're able to complete the square. You're able to square root both sides. You'll square root both sides, subtract 3, and now you know that the answers are -3 plus or minus the square root of 5. All right, I'm going to skip number 8 because I think you've seen a lot of examples already, but I will take a look at 12. 12 is 4p minus 2 equals 100. So we have to put it in standard form. Let's distribute. 4p squared minus 8p equals 100. Well, let's keep going. Let's put it in standard form. All right. So from here, we need the leading coefficient to be 1. So you need to divide by 4. P squared minus 2p minus 25 equals 0. All right. Now, 25, p squared and 25 are perfect squares. But take a look at this minus sign. That minus sign is going to cause us problems. So we have to use completing the square in order to do this. This is not a PST. This is not a perfect square trinomial. So we follow the steps. Take half of -2, square it, and we get 1. So you add 1 to both sides. And I think I skipped a step here. Sorry, guys. Add 25 to both sides, 25. Add 1 because of this. And now we have a perfect square trinomial, which can be written as a square of a binomial. Right? 26 cannot be simplified. So we just write that p is equivalent to 1 plus or minus square root 26. Now I'd like to point out one thing. With your calculator, if you want to check your solutions, type into your calculator 1 plus the square root of 26 and hit enter. Then hit the STO button and you'll have whatever this decimal is and you'll store it in for x. And then all you have to do is type 4x squared minus 8x. And when you hit enter again, you should get 100 as your solution. So there you can check using your calculator very, very quickly. All right. Solve the equation by completing the square. Let's do number 4 first. It's already in standard form, so we divide by 2. We need to move c to the other side. We need to take half of 10 and square it to both sides. Dang. So it's -12 plus 25. There we go. And now this is a perfect square trinomial, which can be written as the square of a binomial. That's 13. We square root both sides. Square root both sides. And then add 5 to both sides. All That's what you got. All right, work this one out for number 3. I'll write the answer down at the bottom. All right, so after you've paused this, these should be your solutions at the bottom of the screen. All right, now, the other reason completing the square is nice is it will allow you to put things into vertex form quickly. So you can know what the vertex is, or what the min or max are of the equation. So, just like before, all right, pretend this is a 0, I guess, and you follow the same steps. All right, you're going to same steps, except the difference here is please watch that this 44 stays on the outside. So basically, you're going to pretend that the equation is x squared plus 14x equals 0 like this. So when I do this, 49 comes from half of b squared. And so it's 49 on the other side. Sorry, I needed to put a y here. So it's y, and you put plus 49 on both sides. Now right here you have x plus 7 squared. And y plus 49. So instead of solving, you're just going to write it in vertex form. And please don't forget, I left out the plus 44, so there should be a plus 44 here. So now when I minus 49 from both sides, y equals x plus 7 squared minus 5. So I now have it in vertex form. All right, so we'll look at these steps again. You're adding 49 to both sides. That becomes x plus 7. You're subtracting 49. And you get your equation y equals x plus 7 squared minus 5. So the vertex, what is the vertex? The vertex is negative 7, negative 5. All right, guided practice 7 and 9. Oh, whoops, I think these numbers are not quite right. Let me fix them. All right, so I'm just gonna do 15 for you. So number 15 gives you f of x. Now, that looks different than what we just did. But please remember that f of x is simply y. So, first thing, we want to remember that the minus 4 is there, but leave it there. So we're going to put it way off to the edge. And we're now going to add something to make this parentheses a perfect square trinomial. Well, half of b squared is 4, so we're adding 4 to both sides. Now this is x minus 2 squared, and there's a minus 4, and over here is plus 4. The last step is you subtract 4 from both sides. And you know the vertex. The vertex is at 2, negative 8. All right, same steps here. Let's take a look at this one, number 6. All right. So I make sure to remember the 53, but now I'm looking at just this part. half of 16 squared is y plus 64. And now, a PST becomes an SOB, square of binomial, equals all that. Last step, u minus 64. Y is now in vertex form. Oh, the difference there is, I think, minus 11. So our vertex is -8, -11. All right, so I'd pause the video. Try number 5 on your own. I'll write the answer at the bottom. All right, so your answer in vertex form for this, I'm hoping, is y equals x minus 6 squared minus 14. So the vertex, 6, -14. That's it. All right, that should be it. We'll do a lot more of these problems in class, but make sure you do the rest of the guided practices. Great job.